Joining us now from Boston is Shira Ruderman, Executive Director of the Ruderman Family Foundation. Shira, thanks for joining us here on the Rundown. Look, I want to maybe set the phase of that discussion about looking at like some of the some key graphs that you have in your poll. Now, one is voting participation. Voting participation among American Jews and the general American public, 50% of the general public, 85% American Jews. And donors, 20 out of the 50 largest single donors in the 2016 election cycle were Jews, 11 out of 14 for the Democrats, 9 out of 36 for the GOP. And I think, Shira, I'm underscoring here, that's why maybe the Jewish vote matters, even though certainly nationally the numbers are really quite small.
Correct. First, thank you for having me. And I think you pointed out very important points of the finding in the paper. That yes, I think the Jewish community are heavily involved in what I call active democratic rights and social rights to be present in their communities, to take actions in political life, to increase and encourage the community to go out to vote. And I think you're right. It is very impressive to see that compared to our size in our society in the United States, how active we are. You also pointed out, I think, a very important point that as much as President Trump is very good for the state of Israel, it's not always aligned with the domestic issues that the American Jewish community, like the general community, are consumed by. And this gap makes, I think, the choice very hard and quite honestly, difficult, because you need to choose between what's good for your state, your homeland as a Jewish person, to what's good for your country where you live in and you see yourself as a citizen of.
Right. Now, I want to pull out another graph from your report, which I think is very telling and maybe really just sums up why the Democrats or liberal Democrats still continue to enjoy such a large majority. And I think the percentages here, which is what I found surprising. Most important voting issues among U.S. Jews in presidential elections, 43% health insurance, 28% right to bear arms, I guess to some degree gun control, 4% pro-Israel stance, 25% other, and I think that 4% is maybe even lower than a lot of people would anticipate, Shira. But what's interesting in your report, and talk a little about it, is the definition of what it means to be pro-Israel.
I would first say that it's important not to take away that when we hear 4%, it makes you think that the majority of the American Jewish community doesn't care about Israel. Israel is not in their mind, which is not true. I think what this report says, that the issue of Israel is not the first issue that they vote on. It's important, it's really important, because we strengthen the relationship and the importance of the relationship between American Jewry to the state of Israel. The majority of the Jewish community, from right to left, from left to right, is pro-Israel, cares about Israel. It's true, yes, from generation to generation. I think the connection is not as strong as we knew before, and the younger generation is more critical of Israel, but it doesn't mean they don't care and they're not pro-Israel. Having me saying it, you just stated what the paper shows, the domestic issues, healthcare, gun violence, and other issues are the key elements for how people vote, which is similar to how we vote in Israel, right? We vote based on how we think the candidate or the party in this regard will do for us as citizens or residents. This is what's happening here. When you are a Jewish person, you always ask yourself, do I go by what's right to the state or by what's right for my values as a citizen on domestic issues? And I think that this tension is becoming more clear from the election, from the last election to this one, because both candidates are pro-Israel. Both candidates, I think, are good for the Jewish people. But now is like domestically, who is better for the people? And I think here, which is not a political statement, what I'm saying is just to state the finding, the tension within the Jewish community is big. The majority of the Jewish community, by and large, is Democrat and feel very aligned with the values of the domestic issues that they care about. But when it comes to the state of Israel, I think you said fairly, there is no doubt that President Trump was very good and a good friend of the state of Israel.
Right, but of course, whether that will help him among the American Jewish community to break that sort of 30% ceiling, well, I guess this report offers some potential answers, but we'll have to actually wait and see what comes on Election Day. Shira Ruderman, thank you for joining us on The Rundown.